Dear daughter, I'm writing this with a lump in my throat, because what I thought was love turned out to be a trap. If you ever go through something like this, I want you to have a beacon amidst the confusion. It was a sunny afternoon, and I had just come back from work. He greeted me with such a warm smile. The flowers on the table seemed more vibrant. He always did that, little gestures that felt full of affection. It was comforting. It was sweet. When I started talking about my plans for the weekend, he inserted himself into every detail. We can do this together, right? His voice was soft, his gaze deep and attentive, but there was something there that I didn't realize. A slight pressure. I couldn't see it. I didn't want to see. And it was in that moment that I realized that wasn't affection. It was disguised possessiveness. The words danced in my mind, but I was still mesmerized by the way he looked at me. Instead of feeling freedom, there was a weight, as if every choice required his approval. Every plan I suggested was met with a look that seemed to calculate the space I occupied. The lesson I learned, my daughter, is simple yet powerful. Watch for the signs. They are subtle but revealing. When care becomes control, love turns into a trap. The first sign? The way your opinions are received. If you start to feel strange expressing your desires, that's a problem. The translation of that feeling is clear. Your happiness depends on what I deem right. And the boundary? Never forget to assert, I need to be heard. My choices matter. Always remember this. Sweetness is not always safety. There were moments when, looking at him, I could see the good within. Memories of laughter and peaceful nights filled my mind, but those recollections were like shadows, dancing around what really mattered. And in the meantime, I was becoming a spectator in my own life. Looking back, I realize his kindness came with a cost. He always appeared understanding about the little things. He encouraged me to talk about my dreams, but beneath it all, there was a subtle control, an invisible thread connecting our conversations, where I was led to believe his interest was genuine, when in fact, it was disguised possessiveness. One time, during dinner, I mentioned the possibility of traveling alone. His smile instantly vanished. The words that came out of his mouth were not what I expected. Why would you need that? Aren't we happy together? He didn't see the trip as an opportunity for growth, but as a threat. And there, in front of everyone, my desire was silenced. That night was marked by a heavy silence. The weight of expectation in his eyes left me breathless. I tried to justify my yearning even to myself. Of course, I'm grateful for his company, but the truth was different. Something much deeper was unfolding, a vicious cycle of validation that I was chasing. When he was happy, I felt I could be happy too, but it was a distorted happiness, a well-camouflaged trap. And it was in this scenario that time began to drag on, the feeling of freedom slowly evaporating, like steam on a fogged mirror. It was as if I was constantly seeking approval, navigating through turbulent waters. Every time I expressed a desire, I heard his distant laughter, as if I were trying to speak another language. You're exaggerating, he would say, with a tone that seemed gentle, but echoed like a sound in an empty hallway. I remember one day when, after months of hesitation, I decided to sign up for a painting class. I thought it would be liberating. I was excited, but as soon as I shared the news with him, his expression changed. He tried to hide it, but the tension was there. Wouldn't it be better if we did something together, like dinner? He didn't directly oppose me, but the way he steered the conversation made my enthusiasm wilt. Then, one random night, while looking over the portraits I had painted, I realized there was not just paint on the canvases, but a part of me. In them, there was color, movement, and above all, freedom. The freedom I no longer felt in real life. Each brushstroke carried repressed desires and suffocated dreams. There, through art, I was able to scream what I couldn't say. I needed that experience, not just to paint, but to rediscover myself. And so, on a whim, I decided to confront him. During a discussion about our weekend plans, I said, I want to continue my painting classes. I need this. His reaction was instant and predictable. The closed-off look, the tension in his muscles. You don't understand. It's just a distraction. What you really need is us. That phrase cut deeper than I expected. In that moment, I realized it wasn't about love. It was a game of control. Every word he spoke reinforced that pattern. My heart raced, but at the same time, there was a growing determination inside me. The weight was becoming unbearable, And I knew I needed to change the narrative. I needed to reclaim my voice. I want to be heard. My choices matter. As I spoke those words, something broke. It was like triggering a silent storm. He stood there in silence, stunned. Maybe he hadn't expected me to speak up, or to put myself first. In that moment, reality became clear. The line between love and control had been blurred for too long, and now it was as sharp as a cut. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I knew the first step was to recognize that sweetness doesn't always mean safety. Over time, I learned to listen to my own heart amidst the chaos. Every step taken toward self-validation became an act of resistance. Painting became my refuge, a space where his control couldn't reach. He tried to push back against every new step I took, but slowly, I began to recover. If you ever feel lost, remember this. Healthy love contains no traps. It is an open field, a safe space. What seems sweet can turn to poison if not nurtured. Your worth should never depend on someone else's acceptance. You deserve to shine, daughter. Never forget that. And so, as my brushstrokes became bolder, I began to rediscover parts of myself that I had buried under the pressure of his control. The colors weren't just paint. They were shouts of freedom. Each session in the painting class became a silent act of rebellion against what my life had become, a routine with no room for authenticity. I had left home seeking a breath of fresh air, and instead found myself suffocated. The world outside seemed so vibrant, while within four walls, I was just a shadow, reflecting others' desires. Art became a bridge, a way to connect with the essence I had almost forgotten. On a cloudy morning, I felt a wave of courage. I looked into the mirrors of my soul and saw a woman who wanted to live fully. My determination grew like a flower breaking through hard soil, yearning for light. I realized that I needed to go beyond my internal struggle and make a bold move to show him my true self. But the conversation that followed was not easy. I found him on an ordinary day, sitting on the couch, staring at the television screen, yet clearly distant. The atmosphere was heavy, like before a storm. When I mentioned my classes, his response was instantaneous. "Why do you still need that? Aren't you happy here?" That question echoed like a hammer striking a vulnerable surface. I was overwhelmed by a deep sadness, as if a hole had opened inside me. I wasn't seeking approval. I wanted to be understood, and deep down in my mind, I sensed that this conversation would never end well. He didn't want to listen. He wanted to control. "I'm not asking for your permission," I said, my voice trembling between insecurity and determination. He raised his eyebrows, disdain evident. "Do you really think painting is going to change anything?" His tone was no longer gentle. It was sharp, like broken glass. In that moment, I faced the reality. He did not see my value. That was a turning point. I started to feel the weight of memories, of the moments we built together, which were, in fact, rooted in the need for control rather than genuine love. Deep down, everything fit into a pattern. His need to have everything under control, to mold me according to his vision. The echo of that argument lingered in the walls of my mind, and as I walked away that night, I realized I had two choices: to keep fighting for attention or to seek my own path. The desire to be loved for who I was began to be overshadowed by the need not just to be tolerated, but to be celebrated. In the following weeks, I dove deeper into painting. The canvases became witnesses to my transformation. I created shapes and colors that spoke of my struggles, my fears, but also of the strength that was beginning to emerge. Each piece I finished was a small victory against the imposed silence. And with each new creation, I realized that my art expressed things I still couldn't articulate. During a local exhibition, I found myself facing an audience that looked at my paintings. Instead of seeing their critical gazes, I saw admiration on the faces of strangers. It was liberating. In that moment, I realized I could be rewarded not by anyone's approval, but by the pure appreciation of my work. People saw something in me that I couldn't see. My fears began to dissolve like mist in the sun. That night, I returned home with a smile on my face. I even felt light, as if I were floating. But as I opened the door, reality hit me hard. He was there, standing with his arms crossed, like a judge ready to pronounce a verdict. "I think you've lost sight of things," he began. "These exhibitions, they're a distraction. You're drifting away from us." His tone reminded me of all the times I tried to justify my desires. but I wouldn't engage in that dance anymore. You don't understand, I replied, now with more confidence. This is not just about art. It's about who I am. If you can't accept that, then what do we really have? His expression changed to frustration. The look that once held possession was now filled with disbelief. The tension in the room was palpable. There was a fine line between love and control that had become more visible than ever. He wanted to continue shaping my reality, but with every word that left my mouth, I felt freer, less trapped. If you want to lose me because of who I am, then maybe this love isn't love, I said, feeling a bittersweet sense of relief. The words spilled from my lips like the last drop of water from a long stagnant reservoir. The silence that followed was deafening. And there, for the first time, I realized that true freedom didn't come from how I shaped myself for him, but from how I chose to be myself, unapologetically. Never forget, daughter, that true strength lies in being authentic. Love should be a reflection of freedom, and if it's not, the struggle isn't worth it. If one day you find yourself in a tight space, remember that sweetness can hide traps. Always choose freedom. You deserve to shine, simply for being who you are. The silence that followed was thick, almost tangible. The words floated in the air like a distant echo of a storm approaching. I knew something had shifted within me. The resistance was growing, pulsing like a drum in my chest, dictating the rhythm of my newly discovered freedom. But the tension between us didn't dissipate. He stood there, watching with eyes that seemed to try to decipher me. Are you really going to let this affect us? His tone was a mix of disbelief and desperation, as if he wanted to pull me back into the box I had been in. I looked into his eyes, trying to decipher whether there was still love there, or just the reflection of disguised control. What I saw were shadows of possessiveness, shadows that moved like snakes seeking a way to infiltrate my mind once again. But the determination that now filled me was stronger. I won't let anything affect what we are. I'm choosing to be who I am, I replied, each word like a weight of steel. As I left that room, I felt that, at the same time, I was leaving behind a part of myself and carrying with me a new version of what I could be. As the days dragged on, the tensions turned into a strange dance, a game of cat and mouse. He tried to pull me back, but now there was an invisible barrier between us. It was a constant struggle, but I had begun to learn to read every movement, every gesture, picking up on the little signals that had previously gone unnoticed. I remember one particular night when he sat next to me while I was painting. The smell of the solvent mingled with the sweet aroma of the flowers on the table. He tried to seem understanding, but his comments resonated like small bombs. Why don't you paint something I like? You know I prefer it when you do portraits. His eyes were fixed on the canvas, but not on the art. He was looking at me as if trying to shape my brushstrokes. After a moment of reflection, an idea emerged. I paint what I feel, and that is part of me, I said, without looking away. The silence that settled was deafening. It wasn't just about the painting. It was about me, about what I needed to say. And deep down, a part of him began to understand that the artist wasn't going to back down. With each day, these interactions became a fine line between love and control. He tried to silence my voice, and I, on the other hand, tried to scream through the colors. But there were days when I felt myself being pulled into his gravity, like a tide that refuses to leave the dry sand. In moments of weakness, I wondered if all that effort was truly worth it. And in that emotional whirlwind, I started to question the fragility of my feelings. One night, after a long day, I found myself staring at a blank canvas. The paint seemed to be waiting for me with eager anticipation, but I was exhausted. The weight of our relationship threatened to stifle my creativity. The desire for freedom intertwined with the fear of loneliness. A sad draft began to take shape. With my heart racing, I picked up the brush, but hesitated. What did I really want? To paint an image of freedom or to tell the story I was living? That's when I realized that each brushstroke could be an act of resistance. My feelings weren't weak. They were my allies, and I needed to embrace them, not fear them. Using a deep red, I painted strokes that represented the pain. A dark shadow took shape, invading the canvas as a symbol of everything that imprisoned me. But alongside it, a bright light began to emerge, equally strong, a representation of the strength I had yet to fully recognize. It seemed that each color expressed a part of me that had been suffocated. And contrary to what I had feared, that image wasn't a cry of despair, but a call to life. the recognition that I had power over my own destiny. That night, surrounded by the darkness of the room, I made a silent pact with myself. I would never again allow love to be confused with possession. And within the context of that promise, something powerful began to unfold within me. From that moment on, it didn't matter what he said. I had found the courage to express who I truly was. Art became my voice, and I promised that, no matter what happened, I would never again allow anyone to extinguish the light I carry inside me.